Good morning, Breakfast with Bacon fans. I don't think I even need to introduce my new friend, my guest. And I'm going to massacre his beautiful name, Xavier. I'm not going to do that one, okay? Reyes-Ayral. I can never get the last name. Yes, Ayral? Okay.
Perfect.
He is the author of this book, which you see I have a place mark in it because I still, after several months, have only gotten that far. The Revelations, the hidden secret messages and prophecies of the Blessed Virgin Mary. If you saw part 1, you are going to want to stay tuned and watch part 2 of this show. There are messages in this book. Our mother has been speaking to us for centuries, and her messages are coming fast and furious now. And I want to clarify, first I'll say thank you for being my guest, but Xavier, these messages, just for those who didn't see our first show, these are approved messages as well as approved speakers who have some messages that are not yet approved. Can you clarify for us what's in this book?
Certainly. The majority of the apparition cases that are described in this book have been formally approved by their local bishops and by the congregation, or in one instance, by the dicasterium of the doctrine of the faith. Now, there are a couple of other apparition sites, like Garabandal in Spain, Medjugorje, that have not yet been approved, but neither have they been condemned.
Right.
And in a time like ours, where other apparition sites have been bluntly condemned by the church without hesitation or scruples, it says volumes. It covers as well some revelations that have been given to some mystics that are past and others that are still alive, and but all in all, that have not been condemned. There is no condemned apparition site in here. And at the very beginning of the book, it covers a canonic sub-chapter of canonic law, which allows that, as per a decree instituted by Paul VI, that indeed we as lay people are allowed, formally allowed, to discuss any apparition site that has not yet been approved, as long as they have not been condemned. And that is what this book dedicates itself to.
That was huge when I read that, because you had said that on the air, but when I read that, it's something spoke inside of me where, first of all, why were they condemned, or not condemned, excuse me, why were we prevented from listening, learning, reading, talking last time? Okay, I'm less concerned. But then why that Pope? Why all of a sudden did God tell that Pope, you need to let people know they can start talking about this, as if he foresaw that we were going to need to talk about these apparitions because the bishops and the cardinals and those in charge weren't going to let us know the things that they probably should have let us know. You said Paul VI, right?
Yes.
And he's the one who was the Pope during Vatican II, correct?
That's absolutely correct. Yes.
And he's the one that was supposed to reveal the message in 1960?
Actually, it was John the 23rd
Okay.
who actually opened the envelope in 1960, as instructed, who decided, in his fallible humility or lack thereof, that this message was in fact not for the time, not for his times, which is quite remarkable. It takes a lot of assurance in oneself to make such a statement.
I think of that all the time. Our mother told you something and you kind of overrode her?
Exactly.
I did not want to be him on Judgment Day.
No,
No.
it's very great.
Yeah.
It's very great. And not just him, as you mentioned, very rightfully so, Christine. Paul VI followed suit and followed the example of his predecessor by not revealing the secret either. So John Paul I, he had the excuse of having been a pope, not to have been able to live very long.
Yeah.
33 days. And his death was, the least we could say, somewhat questionable, mysterious, or maybe not so mysterious after all. John Paul II afterwards, at least before the end of his reign, was able to decree the liberation of the first half of the Third Secret of Fatima, which was the vision. But ask yourself this question, and I'd be very curious to know what you think, Christine, as well. But you know, on the first two secrets of Fatima, they were always a vision, immediately accompanied by a message of the Blessed Virgin Mary giving an explanation of the vision.
Yeah.
According to those prelates in June of 2000, it appeared that only the vision of the Third Secret appeared without any further explanation of the Blessed Virgin Mary. That particular theory was quickly proven wrong, among others by Cardinal Ottaviani, and who clearly revealed the third secret, the second half of the secret of Fatima, which, by the way, is in the book as well. This
So
book
say
was
that again. Archbishop Ottaviani revealed the second.
Yes, he revealed. He read the full third secret of Fatima,
Right.
and revealed the text of the explanation of the message that accompanied the vision of the third secret of Fatima. And it was later related through a German magazine. And because it was from that particular magazine, those German journalists somehow distorted and added a few more information to add more sensationalism to the whole thing.
Right.
But let me give you an anecdote that is quite remarkable. I'm sure that your auditors and yourself, you're familiar with the famous apparition site of Akita in Japan. Exactly. Sister Sasagawa, Agnes Sasagawa. The story of its approval by Cardinal Ratzinger, future Pope Benedict XVI, is extraordinary. No? You know how it happened? You know, they were, like in every apparition site that was about to be approved, it always being under assault by the devil with defamation, attacks, criticism, and so on and so forth. So Bishop Ito, who was the local bishop of the convent of Akita, mounted a full dossier. And in 1980, took a plane from Tokyo direct to Rome to meet with the prefect of the Congregation of the Doctrine of the Faith, Ratzinger. So when he appeared, and Ratzinger was perplexed because he heard positive but a lot of negative matters involving Akita. So when he received Bishop Ito, he was listening carefully, and Bishop Ito brought him forth the last message that Sister Sasagawa received, remarkably enough, on October 13th, I believe, if memory serves, 1978, if I'm not mistaken, which was the anniversary
of the Fatima secret.
Exactement.
The miracle.
And of the miracle of the dancing of the sun. No? So he showed it to the cardinal and tried to explain, look, Your Eminence, there were attenuated circumstances. There was a lot of defamation. He was justifying and defending Sister Sasagawa. The cardinal was listening carefully, reading the message of Akita, the very last one, which, by the way, is hair-raising. I invite you, all your auditors and viewers, to check on the internet the last message of Akita, October 13th, 1978, if memory serves. And it's absolutely, it's prophetic, and it will drop the temperature of your body of at least 5 degrees. So when Cardinal Ratzinger read the message, he immediately put it down on the table and said, Excellency, there's no further need to continue this conversation. There will be no further investigation of Akita. Immediately, the good bishop said, but Your Eminence, you didn't give me a chance to explain myself or even give a proper defense to Sister Sasagawa. Again, the cardinal interrupted once more, very kindly, but he interrupted the bishop and said, no, you do not understand, Excellency. There will be no further investigation because as of this day forth, the apparitions and the apparition case of Akita will be formally recognized by the Vatican, or at least by this congregation, as being worthy of belief. Yeah. The bishop said, but what made you change your mind in such a drastic way, Your Eminence? And he said, this same message that you've given me, this message is in fact the third
secret of
Fatima. Yeah. Which has been hidden for decades. And remarkably enough, you'll be very possibly not surprised, but you'll be happy to know, or unhappy to know rather, that Sister Sasagawa, very much like Sister Lucia dos Santos, has been forced to this day to vow silence and is being locked up in her convent, prohibited by her local bishop to discuss the apparitions case and the last message of Our Lady given to her. Why? Why? It's been formally approved as by the local bishop, by the local archdiocese of Akita, by the Congregation of the Doctrine of the Faith, and yet, very much like Lucia dos Santos, they're trying to put the bushel and the light under the bushel, contrary to what the Gospels tell us to do, to always put the light above the bushel. It's a disgrace. Yeah. It's a scandal. And to that effect, very much like people like you, and I mentioned you, Christine, in other interviews like that in John Henry Weston and with Refuge and the Immaculate Heart and other places I've been interviewed.
Right.
People like you and like your confreres and concerns are doing the job, are doing the work, the mission that heaven has entrusted the Catholic Church in Rome to echo and propagate this message. This message, no longer of admonition, it's a message of love. It's not an ultimatum by no means. It's a call to urgent conversion before it's too late. Conversion principally, and this can never be repeated enough, conversion through baptism within the Roman Catholic and Apostolic Church, conversion through weekly confession. This is imperative. Those are the keys of salvation. And finally, conversion through the reception of the Holy Eucharist, which is not a symbol. Every Sunday is not a symbol. It is truly the body and blood, soul and divinity of our Lord Jesus Christ. Those three elements we just mentioned are the cornerstone of the message given by heaven through heaven's first emissary, the Blessed Virgin Mary, in every single apparition site. That is the common factor in all these apparition sites. Convert before it's too late. And that is what in Akita, in Fatima, in La Salette, in La Fraudet, through Marie-Julie Jany, and in so many other apparition sites recognized by the Catholic Church, heaven is sending for a message to humanity. Not an ultimatum, not to frighten you, but to save yourself in spirit and in body. And we'll go into that as you lead us, Christine.
That is just, I heard it before, but when you say it again, it's always like it's the first time I'm hearing it. And is that secret of Akita, because I know that you talk about Sister Agnes Sasagawa in here, that secret that is supposed to mirror the Third Secret of Fatima, is that in here?
It is. Would you like me?
Could you?
Would you like me to?
Yes.
Of course.
Because it's too thick for me to find the page quick enough.
The advantage of being the author of this book, I know by heart where everything is. So I will find it for you.
This is the only Moby Dick sized book that I've ever enjoyed reading. Besides the Bible.
That's one of the things that I enjoy so much about your show, your sense of humor.
You know what? I say, Xavier, Jesus created sense of humor, and we have scary times coming, and fun and laughter and seriousness are not mutually exclusive. I believe Jesus survived those 3 difficult years because in the private time, he and his apostles told jokes like, oh my gosh, I'm sure that they were laughing with each other.
But one of the things that I've noticed in your shows is you put the proper and the relevant importance on these particular prophecies, because these prophecies have been foretold for one reason, and not to just dismiss them. And for instance, recently, and I have the message here, and which I'm about to read to you, but very quickly, I had an argument, if you can call that an argument, with a priest of nearby Paris, close by, and we were talking about sensationalism. He was telling us, well, Xavier, all these messages, these prophecies always orbit around sensationalism. And for those of us who have faith, it's not necessary. My answer to this priest was, Father, you're quite right. Men like you, men like those that surround you, who are consumed with faith, indeed do not need these sort of messages or sensationalistic prophecies. However, there are a great many people who are agnostic, who are lukewarm, or who need these to change their lives. There is a reason why heaven is transmitting these messages. Who are we to say or to estimate the degree of importance or value? These messages have been bestowed with one mission and one mission only: to be echoed, to be received in the heart of the faithful. And that's what you're doing, Christine. That's what other men like Michael Matt, like Dr. Taylor Marshall, like John Henry Weston, and so many others, like you, Christine.
We're all in this together.
And you must continue. Yes.
Yes.
So this is the message of Akita.
What page is it on? Because I'd like to follow as you read.
Page 370.
Okay. Please go ahead whenever you're ready.
Right. And please forgive my French accent.
370, you said?
317.
Oh, it's 317. Okay.
It says as such. This was, by the way, on October 13th, 1973. I was off by 5 years. My dear daughter, listen well to what I have to say to you. You will inform your superior. After a short silence, the Blessed Virgin Mary continued and said, "As I previously told you, if men do not repent and better themselves, the Father will inflict a terrible punishment on all humanity. It will be a punishment greater than the deluge, such as one that has never been seen before. Fire will fall from the sky and will wipe out a great part of humanity, the good as well as the bad, sparing neither priest nor faithful. The survivors will find themselves so desolate that they will envy the dead. The only arms or weapons which will remain for you will be the rosary and the signs left by my son. Each day, recite the prayers of the rosary. With the rosary, pray for the Pope, the bishops, and priests. The work of the devil will infiltrate even into the church in such a way that one will see cardinals opposing cardinals, bishop against bishops. The priests who venerate me will be scorned and opposed by their confrères. Churches and altars will be sacked. The church will be full of those who accept compromises, and the demon will press many priests and consecrated souls to leave the service of the law. The devil will be especially implacable against souls consecrated to God. The thought of the loss of so many souls is the cause of my sadness. If sin increase in number and gravity, there will be no longer pardon for them. With courage, speak to your superior. He will know how to encourage each one of you to pray and to accomplish works of reparation. Sister Sasagawa then asked, "Who is my superior?" The Virgin Mary answered, "It is Bishop Ito who directs your community." And the Virgin Mary smiled and then added, "Will you have something else to ask? Today is the last time that I will speak to you in a living voice. From now on, you will obey he who sent you, the one sent to you and your superior. Pray very much the prayers of the Rosary. I alone am still able to save you from the calamities which approach. Those who place their confidence in me will be saved." And this message was finished and given to Sister Sasagawa on October 13, 1973, which was on the exact anniversary date of the last apparition
Fatima's
of Our
miracle of
Lady
the sun.
Fatima and the dancing of the sun.
Yeah.
That is the message that Cardinal Ratzinger stated and declared to be, in fact, the third secret of Fatima. And the message is very grave. It clearly says that the devil has infiltrated the Vatican, the Roman Catholic, the Holy See. It states of a tremendous calamity, a punishment upon the world, which will wipe out a tremendous and large part of the human race.
Like 75% is what I think I've read.
Marie-Julie mentioned exactly that percentage. Only a quarter of the world's population will survive.
That means we have
Marie-Julie
8 billion people, 6 billion people will be lost between what's already happening with the injection, which we won't name, as well as everything associated with it. Xavier, the one line, you know, I've been Catholic my whole life, and I'd have to confess is they say, pray for the priest, pray for the priest. I haven't prayed for them as hard as I should. I pray for my kids. I pray for my grandkids. I'll pray for some priests that I know. And then, but when I hear all these stories like Faustina and other visionaries who say when they've received visions of hell and purgatory, they say that the priests are in the deepest levels of either hell or purgatory that they choose, right? And they say, because you can see from their hands and the consecrations, but they said they are responsible for so many more people that if I tell someone something incorrect, I'm culpable for me and the person I told. But as a priest, he is culpable for every single person who heard his message, homily, whatever, passed it on, any word he said in confession. And then onward. So right now, when it's said here that the devil will be especially implacable against souls consecrated to God, he is going to tear them up. It just spoke to me when you were reading it that we really need to pray for them, because they're going to be, glorified, the greatest in heaven for making it through, and they're going to be punished deepest in hell. And so it just struck me that we need to pray. And Pope Benedict is in fact a priest. We hear Pope, we forget priest. And the reason I invited you on is because he just finally went to his eternal reward, and we can't make any assumptions where he is. I pray he's already in heaven, but realistically, because he's a pope, so he's a priest, he was a bishop, he's a cardinal, then he's a pope, every word that came from his mouth was measured more harshly, and there's a very good chance he's in purgatory at this point, unless there's so many prayers coming through. Now, I'm not trying to make judgments, it just seems realistic, right? So
I agree.
yeah, so I actually wanted you to come on to talk because of the Pope's passing, because you're so into these prophecies and revelations, and you're so much more familiar with them than I am, because I'm like getting bits and pieces from everywhere. So I wanted to specifically ask you, what do we do now that he's passed? Has that affected or shifted or led us closer to any of these prophecies that any of the seers have spoken? Can you speak to any of that? Is it good? Is it bad? Did it fulfill anything? Did it not?
Yes. First of all, regarding, if you permit me, regarding the matter involving purgatory, you're quite right. Everything you said is right on the dot. On various apparition sites, the Virgin Mary has explained indeed that after death there are three states of existence. There is heaven, purgatory, and hell. All the souls, all without exception, and in all the different levels that exist in purgatory, all the souls that go there are holy souls, for they are purifying themselves with their own will, because they don't deem themselves worthy to go to heaven yet. But one day or the other, they will be liberated from purgatory and go to heaven. The souls that we were told by the Virgin Mary that go to hell are souls that want to go there, that condemn themselves by refusing the last judgment of God as them having been wrong on this or that, and refusing, being bitter, being rebellious, and decide rather lead in hell than serve in heaven. Those souls have finally go to heaven now. Those souls that all their lives aspire to be with God, with Blessed Virgin Mary, with heaven, and finally allow themselves to go. So you're quite right regarding the purgatory and His Holiness Pope Benedict XVI. I was very touched by the testament, the will he left after he passed away, asking forgiveness to all those who he has harmed one way or the other. Of course, I'm certain that the cornerstone of his thoughts went to those families who have suffered abuse, or children in their families being abused, and him perhaps not having acted fully as he could have. And
Right.
probably there was a lot of remorse in the matter. I, for one, have reproached him, I can tell you, since we are being Catholics, that makes us compatriots. Before being a Frenchman, I'm a Catholic. That makes you my countryman, my countrywoman, Christine, and all those who are listening to us right now. But one of the principal things that I reproached gently to His Holiness Pope Benedict XVI is to have stepped down off his cross and not carried on till the end, leaving the way possibly to a new wave of progressism that has led, among other things, to the schism that is taking place today in Germany and now in Belgium. Different magisteriums trying to leave the Roman magisterium to act independently. And this is only beginning. This is a domino effect.
Yeah, it is.
In regards to the effects of the passing away of Pope Benedict XVI, you're quite right. It has an effect. It's been foretold. And in regards to prophecies, there is principally that of Conchita Gonzalez from Garabandal, which again has not been approved, quite so. It has not been condemned. And the fact that it has not been condemned is because the Roman Catholic and Apostolic Church has not found any contradiction between or rather from the messages given or entrusted to the visionaries of Garabandal with the dogma of the faith. If there would have been any contradiction at all, he would have been condemned on the spot, like Bayside was in New York, like Peña Blanca in Chile and in other places. It has not been condemned. That is not subject to interpretation. It is a fact. It is still under investigation, but not condemned. So Conchita Gonzalez mentioned that after 3 popes from the time she received this revelation, and afterwards she corrected herself. She said 4 popes, because there will be one that who will not live very long. She didn't know it would actually take place with John Paul I.
First.
No. But she said after the 4th pope, it will be the beginning of the end of times. Upon the passing away of His Holiness Benedict XVI, we are now formally, according to the revelations received by Conchita Gonzalez, entered into the prophetic times, as Father Laurentin used to call them, or the end of times. There is another mystic, very famous, whom I hold a great deal of affection for, although I have only exchanged correspondence with him. But it was enough for me to develop a certain affection for him and a profound admiration. Reverend Father Michel Rodrigue from Quebec.
Yes.
This man has been, just since the passing away of Pope Benedict XVI, attacked, defamed, spat upon, because he was guilty of the unforgivable crime of having stated that indeed Pope Benedict XVI would die a martyr after the passing away of Pope Francis, who would likewise pass away as a martyr. Sure, if it's not exactly what it happened, does it mean that the apparition case that Father Michel Rodrigue has witnessed all his life since the age of 3 is false? Rubbish.
Right.
This is not so. It is not, first of all, I remind all those who have criticism or condemnation come to them so easily. I must remind them that their duty is not to judge. Their duty is not to condemn, but to pray for their fellow man, particularly for priests. If Father Michel Rodrigue misspoke or misinterpreted perhaps a vision of or anything that possibly he witnessed, it's not considered by the Catholic Church as an evidence of falsehood. It has never been. The same thing could be said and possibly about Conchita Gonzalez having predicted that I do not remember the name of this Italian gentleman, Joey Langino, who was a blind Italian gentleman.
Joey, right? Joey Langino?
Yes, Joey Langino, an American gentleman who was blind since teenage years because of a tire of a truck exploding in his face. He had a tremendous devotion. He went to Garabandal after he met with Padre Pio in Italy, and Padre Pio told him, you have to go there because truly the Virgin appears there. So he went, and there he received a message from the Blessed Virgin Mary through Conchita Gonzalez, promising him that on the day of the miracle that was announced on Pine Hill in Garabandal, he would be able to see it. He passed away a few years ago, and many people began immediately to do the same thing to Conchita Gonzalez as they did to the remarkable priest, Father Michel Rodrigue, defaming her, spitting on her, snarking, making fun, etc. All sorts of mediocrity. This kind of mediocrity, I advise you, is nothing less but a contradiction to men who call themselves Christians. Instead of feeling pity for a mistake that maybe they might have made, they immediately condemned and dropped the sword of Damocles on a person, as I said, who is absolutely unforgivable for having possibly misspoken. Nevertheless, Father Michel Rodrigue has not been defended by anyone, at least not that I've seen. You, Christine, and I honor myself to be at your side, are the first ones. And we will continue to defend this gentleman, this gentle man, this man of God, who has started and initiated his own order, which has been approved by the Roman Catholic Church, and who has done nothing else but good for his fellow man. So I invite all those who criticize to have mercy, which is one other of the principal messages of the Blessed Virgin Mary, and to avoid condemning and criticizing. Father Michel Rodrigue is still under investigation. He has not been condemned by his local bishop, and if he misspoke or misinterpreted, or maybe if the message he gave was misunderstood, which is also a possibility, it does not constitute an evidence that his apparition case or his dossier determines that it is a falsehood. It does not. Therefore, I call upon all of your viewers, especially those hostile ones, to a bit of moderation and especially mercy and charity of heart, no? Which is what we Catholics are called upon. So the principal aspect of the passing away of Pope Benedict XVI is the end of a particular chapter in our history and the beginning of a new one, the beginning of a new era, which has been announced by the Blessed Virgin Mary since the times of La Salette, since the time of Lourdes, La Fraudet, Fatima, and many others. I hope that answers properly your question.
Well, it does. And I always regret when you say things that I don't have my Bible pulled up really quickly, but it says, test the spirits, discern. It said in the end, there will be many people that will be coming, will have itching ears, but it says to listen. And what I'm saying is, there are people I respect so much. I love Michael Voris. I love Christine Watkins. I love Countdown to the Kingdom and Church Militant and John Henry from LifeSite News. And every one of them disagrees a little bit with something. And so what I do is I'm like, well, I listen to this one. I listen to that one. And instead of getting bogged down with the absolute details, oh, you used a period and you should have used a comma, you must be false. Going, like you just said about these messages, they're all going in the same direction. Father Michel Rodriguez's messages are still within the prophetic, what's the word's coming in? What's the word? I'm missing the word, the prophetic consensus. So all these visionaries, they're still all going the same direction. He said many things that have been found to be true and proven. So, it's like saying, my husband, who I agree with most of the time, he's going to be perfect, right? There's going to be sometimes we're going to disagree or he's going to make a mistake, but that doesn't make his credibility shot on the times where he does err. And I think I'm glad you said that. Father Michel, I will never throw him down as a false prophet unless he says something completely ridiculous that can't even be believed, So it's just biblical. It says, be alert, listen, take it in. But be on your toes. Let he who has eyes see, let he who has ears hear. I think that is just the devil, Xavier, don't you? That's trying to say, don't listen to this guy. Don't listen to this guy. Don't listen to Conchita. See, totally wrong. Because the devil is scared to death that we're going to find out truths. And that's really what I think is where it's coming from.
That's a very lucid comment you made. You're absolutely right, Christine. Look, I work with Father... Excuse me, I got a cold from my little boy, which I can't manage to shake.
Kids, the gift that keeps on giving.
Exactly. I work with Father René Laurentin. I'm trying to use an English accent.
René Laurentin.
Exactly. For about 8 years. And then I continued my correspondence with him and we spoke on the phone. We became very good friends, although I was considerably younger than he. For 3 years after this particular investigation we were working on. And Father Laurentin used to tell me something, which quite a few things that really marked me till this day. And at the point, Christine, when you are closer, you realize you're closer to the end than you are from the beginning, you start to weigh in what is important and what is not. Father Laurentin used to tell me, Xavier, whenever an apparition case or a person works in dedication to God, or is consecrated to God, or echoes the message of God through a podcast, through a TV show, maybe through a sermon in church, they will become immediately a primary target of the enemy. You must consider those attacks, those hardships, as a badge of honor, as a wound of war, and so to be honored with. The important thing when this happens is one must learn to develop its French expression. I do not know if it translates well in English, but a crocodile skin. No,
what is it?
A shell, a crocodile skin. In other words,
oh, got it. Yes.
You get hurt.
Develop thick skin.
Voila, exactly. So Father Laurentin said this is one of the things that you see in true works of God. Nevertheless, one must learn to become indifferent. As I said again, the word mediocrity. They used to come very much and very often from Father Laurentin. In regard to Father Michel Rodrigue, all I know is, as the gospel teaches, and which is really the only argument it has left us to discern the truth from the falsehood. I observe the fruit of the tree. And Father Michel Rodrigue has been an exorcist, has saved a lot of people from demonic possessions. That is not the work of a liar. He has mounted an entire new religious order, an order whose constitution has been dictated by our Lord and has not been changed by an iota, not by a comma by Rome, which is incredible, never seen before either. He's building 3 splendid communities to welcome as many faithful as possible. This man, Father Michel Rodrigue, is a man consumed with kindness, has never had the weakness of criticizing or condemning anyone, including those he disagreed with. Father Michel Rodrigue was calling upon his seminar in California a couple of years ago, and calling people to maintain a certain level of charity towards Pope Francis. Now, Father Michel Rodrigue did not agree with a great many things that Pope Francis said, wrote, or did. Nevertheless, his message is that of the Virgin Mary. Have mercy. Do not condemn. If you feel offended, if you feel slapped on one cheek, present the other. The message of the Blessed Virgin Mary, remember, is very basic. She has not come to give you or to give us any new teachings or fundamentals that cannot be found already in the Gospels. She has come only to make an echo of a message she gave 2,000 years ago in a little village called Cana. And the message is very simple.
Do whatever he tells you.
Exactly.
Yeah.
That's the messages of the Virgin Mary. And by the way, regarding to hopelessness, I had again a conversation with a certain lady recently who was afraid because she committed some errors in her life. Goodness, what does God think of her? And a Canadian lady, Canadian German origin, no, Canadian Italian origin. And we were talking about the whole thing, and I remembered again one of the things that I learned from Father Laurentin. He told me, Xavier, do you know, he used to speak like this, Xavier, do you know, my dear, who was the very first man to ever enter in heaven? And I thought, well, please do tell me, Father. I would be delighted to hear it from your lips. He said, the very first man to have ever entered into heaven, even before the Blessed Virgin Mary, even before Saint Joseph, was the worst of man, the last of man, the condemned man on Christ's left when he was crucified, who told Christ, Jesus, remember me when you enter into your kingdom.
On Christ's right.
Well, yes, I'm thinking on Mel Gibson's The Passion.
Okay.
In that movie, he was on his left, but you're right, he wasn't quite right.
Got to make sure we got it right, because the guy on the left.
Yes, otherwise I'll be next to be criticized.
Exactly.
So, and Christ answered, in truth I tell you, today you will be with me in paradise. Then man was the worst of man, greatest of sinners. He was crucified because for a sin he himself admitted he deserved. Yeah. Therefore, the message is a message of hope. Conversion, particularly through the sacrament of confession, is imperative. What this last of man, this criminal did, he confessed by placing his entire faith blindly into Christ. That was enough to save him on the spot. He will not even go to purgatory. Christ said very clearly, it is not subject to interpretation. Today, you will be with me in paradise. I formally and solemnly tell all of your viewers, if you change your lives, if you confess, if you get baptized and convert to the Roman Catholic and Apostolic Church, confess and receive communion, you will be saved. Many of, I can already imagine in my mind saying, yes, the Catholic Church has committed so many errors. What about other churches? The only Christian church ever to have been founded by Christ was a Roman Catholic and Apostolic Church. And do forgive me, but I don't think that for one moment that Christ made a mistake when he did so. And when he declared on Peter, you are Peter, and on this rock I shall build my church, and whatever you declare bounded on the earth will be declared bounded in heaven. Yeah. Was it possible that Christ could not foresee the future? I hardly think so. Although I profoundly respect all the Protestant churches, the other Christian denominations, and Orthodox churches, I cannot help nevertheless to ponder on the fact that those particular churches were founded by men, not by Christ. And I cannot believe for one moment that Christ could have possibly been a mistake. And I cannot help for one moment that division amongst the Christians can help possibly God, but rather his enemy.
You know, Father Mark Riley, a priest friend of mine, said to me, and again, I'm with you. Some of my deeply in love with Jesus Protestant friends are some of the most amazing human beings, right? But he said to me, there is no Protestant religion that has ever been formed by adding anything to the deposit of faith, but only that which they decided to strip away. I don't like this rule about marriage. Let's start our own church. Oh, we don't like this rule about homosexuality. Let's start our own church. We don't like this rule about women priests. Let's start our own church. And if you really listen to that at its core, you're like, yeah, you know, I don't want, and the Bible itself says, woe to anybody who, you know, takes anything away from the word or adds anything to it. And I'm like, okay, you know. So I'm so grateful. Okay, so you also, there's so much we could talk about. So, but I guess our viewers might not want to watch this 3-hour show, right? Just kidding. But you wanted to tell us something about another death that took place recently, the death of Queen Elizabeth, right? Or was it Queen Anne?
Yeah.
I wrote
Elizabeth.
I wrote down Queen Anne going, wait a minute, but Queen Elizabeth recently, that somehow gets us to the 3 days of darkness. Can you kind of go on that timeline and tell us what you know?
Certainly. In my book, in my conclusion, I beg your pardon. In the conclusion of my book, I tried as best as I could to issue a timeline based on the revelations, the entire collection of all the revelations I have gathered in this particular book, so as to make in chronological order, as faithfully as I possibly could, faithful historical line of what we can expect from this moment on forth,
Right.
from the moment of the passing away of Queen Elizabeth. Now, this comes from apparitions that came from La Salette, which has been approved by La Fraudet through Marie-Julie Janis, which has been informally approved in 1876 by Monseigneur Fournier, by the apparitions of Tilly in Normandy, approved by Fatima, by Akita, by Our Lady also of Success in Quito, and by other apparition sites, including also some mystics, French mystics, and Father Michel Rodrigue. So this is what is supposed to happen. And the main part of this timeline I wrote, comes principally from Marie-Julie Janis and La Fraudet in Brittany in France. So according to her and to these particular messengers, after the passing away of Queen Elizabeth, the United Kingdom, as we know it today, will implode into 4 sovereign nations: Scotland, Wales, Northern Ireland, and England. That's part of the prophecy. From that moment forth, there will be tensions as well between Persia, I beg your pardon, Jerusalem, and England. Now, why Jerusalem?
And Persia is Iraq, right?
Iran.
Iran, okay.
Indeed. Keep in mind that these messages were given in the latest part of the 19th century, the 1800s. No? So there was no Iran yet. It was known as Persia. It was just a huge country, but without the modern names. There was no Israel either. Israel would come only to
1945, was it? 47?
47, yes, in the mid 20th century. So what it meant is there would be military and geopolitical tensions between England, Israel, and Iran. Right now, for those of us who are keen in following the international news, we are finding out that Iran has reached 75% of its enrichment process of its uranium reserves. 75% is already enough to start building some nuclear weapons. and some of the long-range ballistic weapons can reach the shores of Greece and southern Italy. So Israel was very clear. It didn't leave any room to any misunderstanding. If Iran were to continue to enrich its uranium, and it is as we speak at this very moment, Israel will not remain inert. A couple of months ago, less than 2 months ago actually, the American US Air Force and the Israeli Air Force were doing open maneuvers and war games on the airspace between northern Israel, Jordan, and Lebanon. For what reason? One can only guess.
Right.
So Marie-Julie Janis mentioned that there would be tensions that would be very grave. There were five, by the way, 5 secrets that Bernadette Soubirous in Lourdes was given. That is, I have no merit. This is freshly acquired knowledge, which I wrote in my book on chapter 9, the very last chapter. Those particular 5 secrets were hidden by the local bishop of Pau and sent very much like the one of La Salette in an iron box secretly in the depth of the Vatican library.
Vault. Or,
Was
yeah.
found, thank goodness. And part of those 5 secrets was that a city in Persia, in Iran, would be totally obliterated and pulverized and cause millions of deaths. She mentioned the number of victims to the last digit. So this is part of what is supposed to happen. Likewise, in this prophecy, it is said that there will be revolutions that would take place throughout Europe, beginning in France, then afterwards in Italy. In France, they will be the most severe. She mentioned as well that the European continent would be invaded by hordes and multitudes of Muslim population mixing the dust of their country within the dust and the ground and soil of the European continent. Now again, keep in mind of the following, the context of the time when those messages were given. In the late 1800s, Maghreb, in other words, the countries of Morocco, Algeria, Tunisia, Libya, Egypt, all of these Muslim countries, even in the Middle East, together did not amount to altogether more than 40, maybe perhaps 50 million people altogether.
Right.
Now we're talking about the hundreds of millions of Muslims in these particular regions of the world. And indeed, since 1965 to this day, there's been millions and millions of Muslims who have moved to Europe through Turkey, South Italy, Spain, and southern France. You have to also to understand the context and the mentality of Europe. The Americans are not perhaps aware of this. Being a Frenchman, now, after being a Catholic, I can relate to your particular fact. Since the end of World War II, a war that no one in my generation, in our generation,
Experienced.
or younger generation have seen, but we grew up with the stories of our fathers and their fathers before them. To this day in Europe, there is that fear because there's been during the occupation by the Germans, a great deal of collaborations with the Belgian population, Dutch population, French population, and there's been a great deal of accusation that have gone for decades. I grew up with those stories as well. So in France, in the Western European continent, everybody is so afraid to appear neo-fascist, neo-extreme to the right-wingist, no? That they go to the other extreme of the political spectrum, and they go to extremism such as socialism, even communism, in order to avoid being called neo-Nazi or neo-fascist. This is the fear and the mentality in Europe. This is a Frenchman telling you this story. You can take my words for it.
Yeah.
I was born there, I grew up there, I studied there. This is my home, my country. Well, today my new France are my half American children and my wife. That's my France today. But that being said, the mentality in Europe is exactly that. And Marie-Julie Janis announced that all these hordes would come from Northern Africa, from the Muslim countries, and the Europeans would open their arms wide open because of misplaced sense of guilt, when none of these people have lived during the occupation or the empire or colonization of these nations. They've gotten their independence, and yet they choose to come back to Europe and to live and to make a living in European lands. Those people that moved to Europe, in their greatest majority, again, this is a Frenchman who's lived the greatest majority of his life in France. will not forgive the Europeans, particularly the French, the English, for having colonized their home country. They have a complex of inferiority. They come to our country and they demand the changes of the laws of the French or the British realm or the French Republic.
Change.
It is unacceptable. This is up to them to adapt to our customs, our rules, and to the laws of our republics and our nations.
But it's the other way around, is what you're saying? So the French are
Absolutely.
just kind of backing down and letting the Muslim population tell them what to do. They're bullying them.
Exactly, Christine. You hit the nail on the head. And particularly the Muslims live principally in their greatest majority, not all of them, but in their majority, they live the laws of the Sharia. The laws of the Sharia is a mixture of their civil rules, their civil laws, with their religious laws.
Right.
In other words, there is no separation between state and church or mosque in that, as far as they're concerned. And they're starting in Europe and in Northern Africa a holy war, a jihadist against the allies of Israel, the infidels, the Christians. This is not a personal point of view. What I'm telling you is an absolute truth, as much so that 2 and 2 are 4. This is a testimony of a Frenchman who was born, who has lived, and who has grown in France. There is a reason why I came to the States. Now, there are various reasons. I married an American girl, and I'm teaching my children tolerance, charity, and by all means to avoid at all costs hatred. For hatred is a spiritual pollution. But at the same time, it's the duty of everyone to defend our church. Now, first with conversion, first with example. And that's what we try to do. No one is perfect, but Thérèse of Lisieux, the little flower of the child Jesus, used to say, the greatest nobility of a Christian is not to reach this level of utter perfection. It does not exist here on earth. But the greatest act of nobility that a Catholic or Christian person can do is upon every fall to see their failures as a new opportunity to get up again and continue. She was absolutely right. We are living in a times where the Catholic Church is going through a civil war of sorts.
Yeah.
And we, particularly those of us who are listening to these messages, are called to take the cross, very much like our fathers and theirs before them did. Not this time to make a crusade to free Jerusalem from Salahuddin, but rather to take the cross to free our hearts from hatred, from misconception, from lack of charity, and also, in a way, I would dare to say, even to save and free Rome from the war it's going under, from its infiltration by lobbies of all sorts, particularly that of Freemasonry and LGBTs and others, which proclaim and preach dogmas that are anti-Catholics.
Right.
But this war must be done peacefully, and this should be your sword.
It's our weapon.
Exactly.
Yeah. Well, I mean, that's a mouthful. So can we kind of keep going then from the Queen to the 3 days of darkness timeline?
Yeah.
So, because before we went on the air, you and I, we talked about, 2021, you said that was the zenith of the pandemic. And then, 2022, we had the Russia-Ukraine thing. We just turned into 2023. And before you get down to, the timeline, again, I always sound stupid, so you're going to go ahead and make me sound smarter than I am. But the Bill Gates and the World Health Organization, how they ran their practice pandemic in 2019, I believe. And they talked about this, if a COVID vaccine accidentally got out, and you know about that, right? The gameplay they did in the simulation. And then within months of the simulation completing, everything happened, the world shut down, and just as they played it out. Well, they just recently had another one where they came together for the next, just in case there's another pandemic. And well, they happen to say the next one's probably going to be a lung disease or a meningitis type of disease, and it's probably going to attack children first, and it's probably going to come out in 2025, just in case. That's what they said in their make-believe scenario. But they set one up, and then one happened. They're already getting prepared for the next pandemic. And this is verifiable stuff. This isn't just, conspiracy theorists talking about it. You can find this information. Of course, it's not going to be always publicized. So going backwards, my own, I was going to say not fully educated, but trying to piece things together brain is, I had spoken to Glenn Hudson, was on my show, and Glenn Hudson is Conchita Gonzalez's mouthpiece here in America. And he talked about the messages of Garabandal. Yeah, I get the right one. Said, if you piece them together, this message with this message and this message, there is an assumption that the miracle is going to take place in April of an even year. So maybe 2024, who knows? And that the warning, because of other messages, was said to be in one message the same calendar year. In another message, it says within 3 months preceding the miracle. So if the miracle is in April of an even year, and it's the same calendar year, and it's within 3 months, we're thinking the warning is going to happen January, February, March, or just before the warning, the miracle in April of an even year. So I was just speculating, and I don't want anyone watching thinking I know anything. Jesus hasn't given me any dates either. But we just entered 2023, and that's kind of my fill in the blank. But what if the warning and the miracle happen in 2024? After that, when the warning happens, is when people are going to jump off the fence, and you must choose sheep or goats. You must, and then the mark of the beast is going to come, because as we know, what we've pieced together is a mark of the beast is going to be something in your wrist, or I think they said even your forehead, where you're going to have to buy or sell. And we're already seeing, medicines and try to get your passport, your vax passport and things. So I'm in my head going, well, if we do have the warning in 2024, and we have to make our decisions for or against God, it makes perfect sense to me that 2025 might be when this, and it's supposed to be a hellacious disease that they're already talking about in this, this fake scenario that they're setting up. So that's just Christine Bacon's, questioning, supposition, maybe, perhaps. So what are your thoughts on any of that, or in the timeline? Because the only thing I'm not filling in there is 2023. Then what maybe should precede that? Or the famine, the crash of the market? What are your thoughts?
Well, that's very lucid. You're hitting the nail again on the head. Of all the apparition cases that I had the privilege to study, there is only one that gives a clue as far as dates are concerned, and that's the one of La Frodais with Marie-Julie Janis.
Okay.
On two different messages that our Lord gave Marie-Julie Janis, our Lord gave a clue. The clue was that the prophecies that have been revealed would start to unravel between the year 80 and the year 83.
Yeah.
Now, Christine, I have to tell you, like we mentioned before, you and I, before the show, I truly was scratching my head. I did not understand, what does that mean? Why didn't our Lord say 1880 or 1980 or even 2080? Why the year 80 or 83? Obviously, he uses, our Lord, he must use one particular year as a year of reference. What on earth could it be? And I could not, for the life of me, figure it out. Finally, about like 3 months before I finished the book, I had a theory. No, again, I'm not an expert. I do not pretend to be, but it seemed to me quite realistic. I thought, could it possibly be the year of the death, of the passing away of Marie-Julie Janis? Remember, Marie-Julie Janis passed away in March of 1941 during the German occupation of France. So I thought to myself, well, let's give it a go. Let's add 80 years to 1941. And to my amazement, it ended up to be 2021. Blast. So at that moment, I thought to myself, well, let's add 83 to 1941. It would be only 2 years later, and it would be 2024. What happened in 2021? Very rightly, like you just explained it, at this very moment, in 2021, something that has never been seen before. The Catholic churches around the globe closed their doors and did not give and distribute anymore the Holy Eucharist out of sheer fear of transmitting a disease by giving the body and the blood of our Lord to the faithful, which in itself is a scandal. It's a scandal, it's a contradiction, but with your own faith. And I can give you an example of that, Lourdes, but I'll come back to that in a moment. So 2021, this would have fit perfectly into the hint that our Lord gave Marie-Julie Janis. What happened in 2022? The unthinkable. Russia invaded Ukraine, throwing oil in a fire which could end into a World War III, a world explosion. Now, they did it. Nobody thought that he would have the guts or would dare throwing the dice, as the Americans say, but he did it. And to this day, at the time when I speak to you, there is no end in sight, simply because Russia cannot afford the luxury of losing faith internationally by losing a conventional war against an inferior enemy. And Ukraine has publicly declared that they will not stop fighting the Russians until they recover every single inch square of Ukrainian pre-2014 territory. Both nations have placed all their pride in a conflict that cannot end either in favor of one or the other, without the other being smashed to pulverines. This has the potential of a third world war. Already, this is no longer between Ukraine and Russia. It hasn't been since a long, long
And the
time.
whole world jumped in on it, at least America. We're all staring at it as if that's the only war going on in the world. They want us to keep our eyes on that one.
Exactly. But this war is between NATO and Russia. If it were just between Ukraine and Russia, it would have been finished in a matter of weeks. But this is NATO giving it all, it's all to Ukraine. Armaments, weapons, ammunitions, information, satellite information, and so on and so forth. This is NATO, and let's not be mistaken, and Russia. The Russians know it fully well, and they will not let go of Ukraine like a dog will not let go of a bone. This has all the potential of leading to a third world war. So
That's
this is
2022.
2022. Now, what will happen in 2023 and 24? Your guess is as good as mine. But nothing, there is no progress, there is no talks yet of any diplomatic issues between Russia and Ukraine. And actually, there is another issue that is starting to emerge in Central Europe, which the Americans are not talking about it at all on your American news, but it's the center of great perplexity and concern in Europe. And that is the tension, the military and political tension between Bosnia and Kosovo. Serbia, I beg your pardon, Serbia and Kosovo. Serbia has been offered by Russia to send them military aid and military equipment to send to the border with Kosovo, who is trying to get its autodetermination and territory. Right now, according to European news, there are tensions that are taking place between Serbia and Kosovo. Nobody in the States are talking about that. But this was also predicted by Garabandal and through Marie-Julie Janis, that from Eastern Europe, there would be a third world conflict that would start and be initiated from. Now, there will be first revolutions in France and Italy. Those revolutions would be starting by people and hordes of legal Frenchmen, but Frenchmen that have not been born in the country. They will burn parts of Paris, and the version explained to Marie-Julie Janis that when you will see the French government being forced to leave Paris and seek refuge elsewhere, this will be the sign for people to leave Paris as quickly as possible. The Virgin Mary further added that after these particular conflicts, there will be two brothers that will be from Germanic and Pakistani origins that would cross Iran, Iraq, and Syria, and with the oldest brother the youngest brother would go to Turkey to try to take the control of the nation, but his head would roll shortly thereafter. The youngest one, whose name would be Arcael de la Torre, would be called by his leftist friends in Italy to take over the government. He will be in power for 1 year, and he will be during a time when the Third World War will be in its full course, and he will be allied to the Russians and initialize and exercise martyrization of Christians, particularly of Roman Catholics. And he will make a massacre, a bloodbath, particularly in the city of Napoli. But his reign will only last 1 year. The version added that the Russians, at that moment, after the passing away of one, possibly two political personalities will initiate a blitzkrieg. First in Ukraine, will wipe out any further resistance, and with secret armies and a major national mobilization, the Russians will have at their disposal a massive conventional army supported by a nuclear arsenal that will, through a major blitzkrieg, take over Poland, part of the Czech Republic, will take over the German territory through its central plains and reach the Rhine River in a matter of days. Once the Rhine River is controlled, the Russians will send further reinforcements through Switzerland and northern Italy, and will attack through 3 different spearheads. The first one will cross the Alps and will go through Switzerland to attack France through its central regions. The principal armed force that Russians will throw crossing the Rhine River, and gambling that France will not use its nuclear arsenal in retaliation, and they will not, according to Marie-Julie Janis, will not be Paris. It will be the city of Orléans. The Russians will send the largest force and its spearhead through Orléans, which will fall in a matter of a day or so.
Can I cut
From
in here?
Orléans,
Can I cut in here? Because so what I'm hearing in my head is a lot of details that all of a sudden they start getting lost. But what you're saying is this has been foretold. Again, we have to listen to these predictions with, I don't want to say with a grain of salt, but we need to have our eyes open and our ears open. And we need to realize that God is giving us all the information that we need. The Bible, the church, have faith. And then he's supplementing it with these imperfect, but prophets, seers. And just like you said earlier, Michel Rodrigue, Father Michel, he's been pretty accurate about everything, but this one thing, and other prophets have been accurate. So what I'm basically hearing is just keep learning this, keep following this, because as I was hearing so many details, it gets swimming. But when I read in here, things make more sense because I can take my time and I can go around and I can make connections and see. But ultimately, if you go through this and you look at all these, again, there's a lot of apparitions, is you just see the love God has for us. As you said earlier, just, I love you. I want you in heaven. I'm sending you messengers. Please pay attention, because I want you not to die and go to hell. So, I mean, what you're just going into was a tremendous amount of detail that God is saying to me, what do you want? I'm giving you everything. You got to do your part and listen. It's basically, that sums it up, right?
Quite. There is a matter that I omitted to mention. Before the Third World War took place, the Virgin Mary informed even Marie-Julie Janis, like the children of Garabandal and others, that there will be a moment, a new Pentecost, a warning, illumination of conscience. I think that was the expression you and
Christine
Watkins used as well. And Marie-Julie Janis mentioned it very lightly, but she did mention it. So before the Third World War will take place, there will be a time when every human being, it will be last, and this is very hard to swallow. It took me quite a while to accept and digest this information. I thought this is an American sort of Hollywood plot, like a fanatic sort of
it's
thing.
What we do, Xavier. It's what we do.
But finally, when I realized that this illumination of conscience, this warning, was foretold not just by Americans, but by very believable messengers like the children of Garabandal and others, then I began to say, you cannot filter. If indeed you believe in one apparition site, you cannot take or cherry pick, I think is the American expression. You have to take it all or reject it all. And for me, Garabandal has its principal credibility through a letter that Padre Pio sent to the children of Garabandal shortly after the apparition cases began. Now, I should say Saint Padre Pio, who was a stigmatist, announced in this letter to have received on the same day he wrote it, a message, an apparition of the Blessed Virgin Mary, confirming to him that indeed the apparition site of Garabandal was authentic. So if you do not believe in Garabandal, forgive me.
Believe in Padre Pio.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Therefore, that particular moment, this illumination of conscience, shall we say, will be a time when every human being without exception around our globe will be able to be granted the grace to see the state of his or her soul the way God sees it's himself.
Right.
It will be a period of time where people will see exactly the content of their spirit for a period of time, according to the visionaries.
5 to 15 minutes.
Exactly, 5 to 15 minutes. At that moment, once this experience is over, every human being, whether you're agnostic, Muslim, Israel, Jew, or Christian, will know that there is such a thing as a God, and will know that the Roman Catholic and Apostolic Church is indeed his church. From that moment forth, there will be unlimited lines of faithful and unchristians who will come and ask for confession. Exactly. And this period of time is supposed to last about 6 weeks or so. And during this time, it will be decreed by heaven that the devil will be prohibited to influence humanity, and to stop it from converting. It will be humanity's last chance to convert without personal interest, but out of conviction, not to save this, but to save this and this. There will be the last chance. For afterwards, people will want to convert, but not for the right reasons, but to save their skin. So during that period of time, according to these prophecies, 6 weeks will take place. At that time, the devil will be allowed once more to interfere and present man with various options. And it appears that the scientific community, along with the political one, will join forces and declare that because of some sort of solar flare, solar storm that will have hit the earth, and it will be proven that indeed this thing will have taken place in such a strength that it's never been seen before. Satellites and a human being, a massive human imagination has taken over, and this not actually come from a God.
Yeah, that really wasn't God talking to you. That's
exactly.
Yeah.
Ridicule will be used as a weapon to ridicule particularly the Christians and the faithful. From that moment forth, the Third World War will then begin. At that time, as I said, there is an immense, and I will not go into the details, but I even drew myself a map with the lines of attacks from the Russians and Muslim armies that are supposed to join and reinforce the Russians from southern Europe, from the northern part of Africa. They will supposedly invade southern Italy. They will make a race with the Russians to reach Rome first. The Russians will be the one to win and plant their flag on the dome of the Vatican. The Muslims will control the southern part of Italy. Southern part of France will be invaded, and the Russians will receive major reinforcements from conventional Muslim forces coming from the French Riviera. And La Costa del Sol in Andalusia, in Spain, will be completely conquered by the Muslims, to the point that the King of Spain will be forced for a very short period of time to leave Spain and come back with reinforcements, not Americans, but reinforcement, and push the Muslims back to the sea.
But again, we're getting into too many details. It starts making my head swim. I think the part that I want everyone to pay attention to is kind of the timeline is I got to go back. We had, the COVID, and then the Russian-Ukraine war, and then we're looking at the warning, and then we're looking at a miracle. And right after that, when Satan comes back and lies to us, that's when the Third World War is supposed to take place. Exactly. And then we've got refuges and things right after that.
There will be a major chastisement that will be presenting itself through various means. One of them will be pandemia of disastrous diseases, one in particular. And Marie-Julie Janis has mentioned, and remarkably enough, has mentioned that there will be no known cure to man except one, given by the Blessed Virgin. Yes, the orphan leaf. And this particular disease will be called the burning plague.
Also in the book. It's also in the book. Get the book.
And this particular disease will be called the burning plague. The symptoms will be very clear. You will have, it will be extraordinarily contamination. How do you say?
Radiation. No, I just read it too.
You will be able to pass it from one person to the other, even through the air.
Infectious, yeah. It'll just be really contagious.
Contagious. It will be airborne. And if you get too close, even by the smell of a corpse, you will catch it. And it will be disastrous. The Virgin Mary explained that you will find a rash, that you will feel so burned, you will feel such heat that your skin will turn red, to the point that afterwards it will turn black with a yellow color of salt in the center. And it will affect your mind, it will affect your tongue, your speech. You will have a speech impediment. you will have tachycardia and your blood pressure will go through the roof. And there will be no known medical relief for
Except for
humanity
the
to tell
Hawthorne.
about it,
Yeah.
except the Blessed Virgin Mary said, the hawthorn leaf. Now, remarkably enough, again, I thought it was remarkable. Again, I thought it was too much an American movie plot. It took me years, Christine, to finally adapt and accept and digest this information. But the message of the Virgin Mary is clear. Once you begin to feel the very, very, very first symptoms, because you must take it in time if you want to be saved.
Yeah.
The Virgin Mary asks that you take this hawthorn leaf and boil some water first for a period of 14 minutes. Now, 13 minutes, not 15 minutes.
I saw
14.
that.
Exactly. And to
Do
have
what
the
she
water
says.
boil. Exactly. Once, beg your pardon. I'm going to kill my little boy. Anyway, afterwards, once the water begins to be boiling, you place the leaf inside, you put a cover on the pot, and you wait for 14 minutes for this boiling water with the hawthorn leaf to form a sort of tea, a tea of sorts. After 14 minutes, exactly, turn off the fire, take off the cover, and you can put it through a coffee filter if you wish to take out the impurities and produce your tea. You are supposed to apply and or consume it or apply it on your body 3 times a day. 3 times a day. If you do so, the Virgin Mary promised healing and complete survival. If you take it too late, you will not survive, but it will at least help you improve and not suffer and have a peaceful death. No, but it is the only remedy that will exist at that time. Check on my book on chapter 2, particularly at the end of chapter 2, there are a great deal of other plans that Marie-Julie Janet has been told by the Virgin Mary for the faithful to believe. After or during this course of chastisement, there will be another one. There will be war, pestilence, and all of this chastisement that man will suffer will be sealed by the last one, which is the 3 days of darkness. Now, I mentioned earlier at the very beginning of your show, Christine, that one of the principal purpose of heaven through its first emissary, the Blessed Virgin Mary, is to save humanity spiritually and also in body, to protect them in body and to survive. For the 3 days of darkness, heaven is asking the faithful to acquire a 100% beeswax candle. Its size is totally and completely irrelevant, insignificant. For during the 3 days of darkness, we are told whether your small or large candle of 100% beeswax will not be consumed. It will remain the same size during the entirety of the 3 days of darkness. And we must believe at the beginning. There will be signs, and I invite you to check on the book exactly as the messages portray them. But there will be signs before the 3 days of darkness take place, and the messengers of the Blessed Virgin Mary, and I suspect Conchita Gonzalez, possibly, I'm not certain, but the ones part of perhaps the secrets of Medjugorje, there will be warnings for people to prepare and get ready for what is to come. But you must take this particular candle, you must gather.
They must be blessed. They must be blessed.
By faith. Always. Everything
so
you
get
have.
them today. Yeah.
Yes. All the sacramentals that you have, everything without exception must be blessed by a Roman Catholic priest. The Virgin also asks you to go back to the use of the holy water and to make an altar and around which, when the 3 times of darkness begin, you must gather around and pray the Holy Rosary. This altar must be composed of the crucifix and of the Holy Family, and of course of the candle, everything blessed by a priest. During those 3 days of darkness, we are told, your windows
cover them.
The
same thing. Cover them. Don't look outside.
Exactly. You are not permitted to look outside. If you do,
you'll die.
If you disobey, you will die on the spot.
Yeah.
That is what we are told also by Padre Pio. He wrote 2 letters to that effect, addressed to the Vatican, explaining that those exact same instructions by heaven. The same thing with Marie-Julie Janet, the same thing with other places. No, we are not to look outside. You will hear obscenities outside. You will hear familiar voices. People are imploring you to open the door, making you believe that they're family members that have managed to reach your house. Under no circumstances are you to disobey the instructions you've received. Under no circumstances are you to open the door. but you must remain with complete faith around the little altar you would have produced yourself with a crucifix, the Holy Family, a statue or a picture, and the blessed candle. Maintain, invest all of your faith into the fact that God will protect you. If you do, you will oblige God the Father, the Son, and the Holy Spirit to protect you. No, the Virgin Mary promised that during those 3 days of darkness, if you have animals outside, particularly for farmers, not to go outside and feed them.
They'll
That
take care of
through
them.
a miracle, they will be fed through the miracle of heaven. Those 3 days of darkness, you must also wear upon yourself at all costs certain things around yourself, sacramentals, a crucifix blessed by a priest,
Scapular.
the scapular of Mount Carmel. And that is one of the things I never understood, why the priests do not talk more about that extraordinary treasure. In 2015, the Virgin appeared to an English monk called Saint Simon Stock. Yes, I know what some of you are saying. I thought all the saints were French. You are almost right. God, out of mercy, had to make an English saint sometimes. So he used Saint Simon Stock. French joke.
That's
Never
okay. I'm a blonde. I get it. All the jokes are aimed at me. And I don't understand.
So to Saint Simon Stock, the Virgin appeared with a child Jesus and showing the blessed scapular of Mount Carmel with the following promise. All those who will pass away or will die at the last moment of their life wearing the scapular of Mount Carmel will never,
See the
ever
fires of hell.
suffer the fires of hell.
Yeah.
You could go to purgatory, but even if you deserve hell, you will not. You are saved. It's an extraordinary treasure. It's salvation. Furthermore, with the same promise came that if you live your life in accordance with a requirement established by the Virgin Mary through Saint Simon Stock, on the first Saturday after you're
you
passing
die.
away, you will go straight to heaven. If you go to purgatory first, it's extraordinary.
Yeah, they're doing everything they can. They're trying to give us everything we can. Try these sacramentals or do this, or pray. Come on, I'm giving you everything. And some people will grab onto the sacramentals. Some people will grab onto the Catholic. Some people will grab but they're like, there's so many promises, and that is just the deepest love of our Lord and of course our mother is saying, I just want, my son is going to be devastated if you're not in heaven. Please be in heaven. Please choose my son. And you know, I think we could talk about this all day, but I look at the clock and we're at a point where most people start turning off. And so let's give them, you know, always a ray of hope, right? Let's give our viewers a final message. So one thing, I asked you this last time, but name one thing you'd have them do differently as a result of something we talked about today.
The principal thing I would invite you all would be this. If you're not Catholic, search for a parish, a Catholic parish, and ask to be baptized. Or ask if the baptism you received in your denomination is acceptable. Go see a priest. Confess all your sins. Make a confession of all of your full lives sins you've committed. Be clean as an angel when you come out of there. Do your penance as dictated by the priest. And most of all, go to receive Holy Communion every Sunday in a state of grace. If you've committed a mortal sin, do not receive the Holy Eucharist, because that would in itself be a mortal sin. You must confess if you've committed a mortal sin first. Then receive every Sunday. I implore you, in the name of the Virgin Mary, the Holy Sacrament of the altar, truly believing that it is not a symbol or remembrance of the Last Supper, but rather the same Christ who raised the dead, the same Christ who was crucified and rose on the third day, the same Son of Mary. Do believe that this is a fact. And finally, I would invite all of your viewers, with as much simplicity as I know how, to please pray for Mrs. Christine Bacon, and
for you,
a charming lady, who is a lady consumed with profound love, and who is consumed with the will of wanting to do God's will. Very much like Michael Matt, or other knights of the Virgin Mary, Mousquetaires of the Virgin Mary. Christine is under assault for the various means. She needs your prayers. She's an extraordinary lady. And I am, as we say in French, union de prière. All of us, union in prayer for Christine Bacon, for her lovely, lovely family, for her mission. She has touched many hearts. She must continue to do so. She needs your help.
We need to get souls in heaven. Thank you. You and I are in that mission together. Let's get souls to heaven. You know, I just want to see God, just like you, say, well done, my good and faithful servant. I'll be like, can I stop suffering now? Can I go have a drink of wine? You know, I can't wait for that day. So you are a blessing. I've said it before. I've held this up several times. Get this book. It is the thickest book that you will ever enjoy reading. I'm looking at my wrong camera here. There we go. Read this book. It's you can read it in bite-sized pieces, but he's pieced together all of these apparitions in such easy detail to understand. And when something's confusing, right underneath it, it says, well, this was said by this person, and here's what it presumes. So, Xavier, I pray the Lord continues to use you. I pray he continues to put, you know, words on your fingers and words on your mouth, and let's just get people to heaven, if God is willing to use humble creatures as us. So all of you watching, follow me on Breakfast with Bacon is my website, Instagram, Facebook, YouTube. Get on to Rumble, and anybody like me or like Xavier that you find, if we have websites, go like us, ask for the newsletters, because it's going to be a very short time before the censorship kicks us off of this social media platform. Xavier, if they want to find you, where do they find you?
Well, they can find me. There is a place in the book where they can order through an American lady in Ohio who sells everything at cost, all the sacramentals, even the hawthorn and all the other plants. They can contact me through her. Check out, it's at the very end of the book, and there is the lady's name, Kathleen Loney, and there is her email address. If you want to contact me, send her any message you want me to receive. She will relay to me, and I will answer you.
Okay, so it's Kathleen Loney.
Yes.
It's Kathleen L. Loney at gmail.com.
Exactly.
I'll put it at the end of this show, so you guys can just click on the link right there, and then you'll be able to do it. So
thank you, Christine. You're absolutely wonderful. Thank you.
You'll be back on. You'll be back on. I
lovely.
got about another 300 pages to read. We'll talk about those. And if another pope dies, who knows? I'm not saying anything.
No, no.
We don't know, right? But you know how I go off the air, right?
Yes, on the sunny side of the street. Is that how it goes?
Something like that. So I'm Dr. Christine Bacon. You've been watching Breakfast with Bacon, and I'd like to remind you always to live your life sunny side up.
Sunny side up. That's right.
Sunny side up.